Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. Later on in the programme, we'll meet the first openly gay US presidential candidate. We'll hear more about Egypt's missing pyramids. Are there 17 more to be found? And comedian Ruby Wax joins us as we look at the darker as well as the lighter side of comedy. But first of all, we look at FIFA. No link with comedy there, that's just a coincidence. The governing body of world football is mired in allegations of corruption. But with the now immortal words, crisis, what is a crisis? The president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, secured the overwhelming support of delegates to continue in the job for another 4 years. So what next? Well, joining me now from Adelaide in Australia is Senator Nick Xenophon. Welcome for joining us there, Nick. Great to have you with us. And this is David Davies here, the former executive director of the English Football Association, which failed in its attempt to postpone Mr. Blatter's election to allow other candidates to come forward. Let me ask you the first question, Nick, which is, what was it that really got you involved in this crisis? Have you always been very interested in football, or was there one specific thing that really attracted your attention?
Look, I have to confess I'm a sports tragic in that I know very little about sports, but I do know that soccer is the beautiful game. It is the world game, and it has tremendous unifying powers. And what FIFA is doing to the world game is a disgrace. I asked a question in the Australian Senate 3 weeks ago of Australia's sports minister as to whether Australia would be seeking its $46 million that it spent on the World Cup bid, asking for their money back on the basis that the bid was so compromised as a result of Lord Treisman's allegations in the House of Commons committee recently. So I think we need to get to a turning point, a tipping point with FIFA.
You're coming from a similar position a bit.
Well, the problem that Nick faces, and people like myself who've long believed that the time for reform of FIFA is long overdue, the problem we face is that overwhelmingly, the rest of the world, 208 nations in FIFA, more nations than you have in the United Nations, don't agree, or at least at this moment do not believe that there needs to be a new leadership to get that reform programme through. And I happen to have thought, and this certainly was reflected in what the Football Association of England acted and did this week, that, you know, at the very least you couldn't have a proper presidential election that gave Mr. Blatter or whoever else a real mandate, a strong mandate, at the same time as all these allegations are flying around. And by the way, the situation is not resolved at the moment, because how is Mr. Bin Hammam from Qatar going to react? How is Jack Warner from Trinidad and Tobago going to react when the allegations are answered, have to be answered by them in July?
Right, so that's a question too. What do you think? You were talking about reform there, Nick, obviously, about FIFA. What would you like them to do? What should they get rid of? What should they do instead?
Well, look, I think Sepp Blatter being re-elected has all the legitimacy of Kim Il-sung being appointed president of North Korea. I mean, the organisation needs complete root and branch reform. You can't have Caesar judging Caesar. There needs to be an independent judicial inquiry or judicial type inquiry. Appointing Henry Kissinger to have some oversight role is more of a political fix than a proper fix of the organisation. And the first thing that needs to be done is to ensure that these allegations of corruption that affect 10 out of the 24 executive members of FIFA, including President Blatter, need to be investigated impartially, thoroughly, by a judicial officer.
Right, and you would say that should
be
done.
I think that there is a need for an independent inquiry, obviously a perceived independent inquiry into all the layer upon layer of allegations that have come out over recent months. And, you know, England, for example, does not enjoy being seen as the Mr. Awkward with the backing of the English media, the awkward squad, if you like, behind it. Nobody enjoys that. Nobody wants to be in that position. But the worst thing that's happening at the moment is so long as these allegations continue to swirl around, good people, and there are many good people inside FIFA and inside the football family around the world, are being smeared by all this.
If Sepp Blatter was commenting on this discussion, he might, I suppose, say, well, England and Australia suffered in the voting for 2018 and 2022, and it's only sour grapes.
Well, that's the point. You know, is it just sour grapes? Personally, I mean, we were nothing to do with the 2022 battle, but it was astounding to some of us that a country that had only a decade previously staged the most fantastic Olympic Games there in Sydney could get one vote out of the 22 there were after the effort that was put in. That was astonishing to us. But I am not optimistic, as things stand, that contest will be rerun. And as in the eyes of FIFA, the allegations are not proven, so why should it be?
What about the point about sour grapes? That's not... I don't think at all, having been listening to you, have the pleasure of listening to you today, I don't think you're doing this for sour grapes. I suppose no one would say they were, but in fact you're more concerned to see some changes in FIFA.
Look, absolutely, and Australians love to win in sports, but if we lose, and if we lose fairly, then we'll cop it on the chin, as unfortunately we do with the Ashes at the beginning of the year. But this is a situation... it still hurts, but this is a situation where it wasn't a fair contest. There is something fundamentally wrong, and David is right. We put on a magnificent Olympic Games just 11 years ago, yet we could only garner one vote. Ours, after spending $46 million into promoting the bid, there is something seriously wrong. And these allegations may not be proven, but the reason why they can't be proven is that I think the system is so broken within FIFA for investigating these complaints that any investigation would lack credibility.
And in fact, in terms of the $46 million, you would really, as you mentioned earlier, you would like to have it back.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the suburban Australian lawyer in me. I reckon there's a bit of a claim on the basis that the whole thing was pretty dodgy. Look, you know, when Sepp Blatter's re-election has as much credibility as Kim Jong Il's in North Korea, I really think that we need to go back to the drawing board, and sponsors and countries, as David has indicated, I think really have an opportunity here to turn things around once and for all before the game's credibility is further eroded.
Everyone predicts there won't be a revote, however much some people may want it. I mean, it's moved on so far, and Sepp Blatter has got such a vast vote in his favour that that won't happen.
David, there only should be a revote, and I'm not very optimistic that Nick will get his money back in Adelaide there, but never mind about that. I think there only should be a revote if allegations of wrongdoing are proven. Now, and allegations that relate to that contest. And we await to see what happens on that. But my own view at the moment is a revote on 2022, let alone what we were particularly concerned about in 2018, highly unlikely.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick, and thank you, David. Well, this week, fighting is continuing, of course, to escalate in Yemen and Syria, with the embattled presidents fighting to hold on to their respective countries. So what next? And does the Arab Spring still have the momentum for full-scale revolution? I'm joined now by Dr. Sami Alfaraj, the head of the Kuwaiti Centre for Strategic Studies, a leading expert on what goes on and what may be about to go on in the Gulf region. Dr. Alfaraj, Yemen has had a lot of headlines this week particularly. Let's just start there by saying, do you think, on the basis of all you know, that Yemen is on the brink of civil war?
In short, yes. It has all the elements of a civil war. It has a regime that is quite entrenched now against its people. It depends on tribal alliances that he had invested in. The smaller tribes, it's not the major tribes like Hashid and Bakil, and even Hashid, to which he belongs as a tribal leader. He is now against Hashid. What is happening in the street of Sana'a is between elements in the same tribe.
And do you think, I mean, in this situation, 3 times he said at least that he was going to, President Saleh, to step aside and he would be given an amnesty, as it were. He wouldn't be brought to trial, but he would step aside, and 3 times he hasn't done that. Do you think there's any likelihood that he will step aside, resign peacefully?
I don't think so, no. I have actually predicted that and said that we have to expect the worst-case scenario in Yemen, and we have to be ready for any influx of refugees. So we have to think of him not moving. It is nice to really attempt to settle the situation peacefully and ask him to move peacefully. But we knew, actually, that he wasn't going to go.
Not going to go peacefully. And so that will come about from civil war, as you said.
If you compare, for instance, the situation of Saleh and of Bashar al-Assad, of Gaddafi, he has the best deal, actually. He will have amnesty from pursuit, legal pursuit, and he would have a sanctuary to go to, and obviously there would be some funds there, included in the deal, not talked about now. However, he is still reluctant to move, so I cannot imagine him being smoothed out of this situation with any other measures.
No. And I mean, in terms of the new Yemen, if he did go, whichever way he went, what sort of regime would follow, and how much would Al Qaeda figure in it, in Yemen?
I believe we have 2 elements. One who are really seasoned politicians, and they would deal with what they can get, basically, within the funds available, within whatever is left not destroyed. And then you have the ideals, the idealistic breed that is leading the demonstration and asking for Saleh to leave peacefully and to maintain the unity of Yemen. It is, the jury is out who is going to win over the other. Based on the history of Yemen, there will be deals to maintain the semblance of status quo there, perhaps. It is, I think, in the nature of policymakers in the Gulf to really look at what is possible. That is to say that our greatest fear is from Al-Qaeda spreading into the GCC. So obviously all our concentration is to get the situation stabilized peacefully and then invest in measures to stop the spread of Qaeda.
Obviously there hasn't been as much Western involvement or interest, in a way, in what's happening in Yemen compared to Libya or whatever. Is that just because Yemen is smaller, less important, or what?
No, because it's scary, actually. It's very scary.
Very scary.
Very scary. It is a tribal, tribal bomb waiting to explode. If it wasn't for the reasonableness of people, the young people in the street. Look at the demonstrations in Yemen. Look how organized they are. Look how they are divided into sectors. It's like battalion division. There is an administration you cannot see. We did not see in any other situation. And therefore, if it wasn't for them, honestly, we would be in a much bloodier situation. I expect it still to be bloodier in the coming days.
And what about the situation now in Syria? I mean, how do you judge that situation at the moment? Is the president safe? No. Yes?
I believe that, we have to here touch on the Iranian strategy. It is very important because Syria represents to Iran like a foothold on the Mediterranean.
Right, so that it's really vital to Iran and they can't stay quiet, if that...
Quiet, no. And we have said, actually, in our papers and discussions in the GCC, that we have to assume the Iranians are fighting with the Syrians, and that is exactly what Mr. Obama said in two speeches, that Iranian hands are there and present. And this really complicates the situation, because it really brings the two other influential powers in the Middle East, and that is Turkey and Israel. Both of them have interests. The first one is basically to act in its historic role as a protector of the Sunni Muslims. And there is evidence that they are really trying to do that. Witness what happened in Lebanon. And now, and the other side is Israel. Israel basically has got to be careful that if this Iranian withdraw from Syria to Lebanon in the worst case scenario, they do not withdraw missiles. Because if they do, then there will be a clash with the Israelis, an early war with Iran that nobody wants or wish to happen.
So you think that Iran may not stay in Syria in that situation, but it would move, in order to have its access to the sea, to Lebanon?
It will move to Lebanon, retrench in Lebanon. I basically take the worst case scenario for the Iranians. I think they're going to fail and the regime will fall, and therefore they have to really retrench in Lebanon. And there is evidence now that the situation in Lebanon is basically kind of changing in order to fit that new strategy.
Well, Sami, thank you very much for that terrific cross-section view of the current situation, and we look forward to welcoming you back very soon and seeing how many of the predictions have come true.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now a first from the United States. The US has its first openly gay candidate from a political party, a major political party, to make a bid for the White House. Republican Fred Karger says his presidential candidacy is about opening up the party to young people and reminding people not to gay bash. But Mr. Karger is not a one-issue political lightweight. Over the years, he's been a senior figure in the campaign teams of Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr., though he hasn't, in fact, run for office until now. This very moment, he joins me now from Sacramento in California. Fred, the phrase that's obviously always quoted, the first openly gay candidate, a phrase that you use and so on, and the campaign uses and so on. Obviously, one of the reasons for saying that is because it's true and something you believe in, but do you think it's also a vote-winning phrase as well, Fred?
Well, yes, in certain circles, and it gets me a seat at the table, being the first openly gay candidate for President of the United States in history. But, I'm a lot more than that. I'm a moderate Republican trying to bring younger people in and have an effect on the Republican Party and talking about issues like education reform and jobs first. So, yeah, there's a lot more to Fred Karger than just being the first gay candidate for president.
You're thinking of the younger voter more than the older voter, are you?
Well, yeah, the kind of mainstream Republican Party, the 65-year-old and up voter has not been quite as enthusiastic about my candidacy as what I'm terming the 18 to 29-year-old demographic. I've spent a lot of time speaking at colleges and universities all over this country, particularly in the first two states of Iowa and New Hampshire, and I've been getting a tremendous reception there and registering new voters and bringing people not just into the Republican Party, but bringing younger voters into the political process. I'm very excited about that.
It's more difficult for you, in a way, having to persuade fellow members of your party when the party in question is the Republicans more than the Democrats. The Democrats might be a bit more open to what you're saying, yeah?
Well, many have, and I've gotten a great reaction. I had a quick meeting and met the new chair of the Democratic National Committee. I've got a great picture and had a great meeting with her predecessor, Tim Kaine. And so my first meeting with a state party official in New Hampshire was with Ray Buckley, who's the chairman of the Democratic State Party in New Hampshire. So I'm reaching out, crossing party lines. I'm calling myself an independent Republican. I'm independent in many ways. I was a maxed out donor to Hillary Clinton last time. So, you know, I like a lot of Americans, I want to go with the candidate, someone that I agree with on issues, someone who's not so polarizing. And that's what I think Fred Karger is. I want to kind of create a new niche in this Republican primary for president, and I think I'm starting to have some impact.
And of course, you've never actually held public office, but what do you think yet? But what do you think is the most important quality that a president needs? You've studied presidents, you worked for Reagan, and so on and so forth. What's the most important quality an American president needs to have?
Well, I think at this juncture, we need someone who's, you know, tough. We need someone who can bring back that optimism and that ability to get along. I'm terming it the American spirit. And, you know, I worked very closely with President Reagan, and he just had that never say die attitude. You know, he came into office in 1981 in dire straits. The economy was terrible. You know, the inflation was at 10.5%. Unemployment was almost where it is today. But he just kept that American spirit up, and he talked us out of that recession. I want to bring that optimism. You know, we got a kind of a mediocre field, I think, of Republican primary candidates. Mitt Romney just announced today. He's kind of, you know, yesterday's news, and we don't quite know where he is on the positions. I don't think he can cut it. You know, and I'm actually going to be filing some papers next week in his home state of Massachusetts about his residency. He's kind of fudged a lot in his political career, and I'm going to be calling him out on that. So, you know, I want to kind of liven up the debate in the Republican primary, but I want to talk about bringing back that optimism that is so American, that we need to light a fire under this country. And President Obama, I think, has failed miserably on that front.
But at the same time, I mean, if you were running, and if you were successful, you got the candidacy and so on, would you think that Sarah Palin would be a good partner on your ticket? Would you get on well together, do you think?
You know, I like Sarah Palin. I've actually met her in Alaska when she was mayor of Wasilla. We had she was a speaker at a luncheon I was up for, and you know, I love her spirit. I love what she's doing for this process. I love the fact that she's gumming up Romney's big day in New Hampshire. She's someone who will excite this campaign. It's, you know, as I say, a mediocre field of Republicans, and I would welcome her. I'm not, you know, speculating about a vice presidential pick at this point, but, you know, there are a lot of attractive people out there, but I just welcome her to the campaign. I hope she files. I was the first to file back on March 23rd, and everyone's kind of following my lead, so I would welcome Sarah Palin to the primary.
Well, we thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to checking in with you later to see if it's going the way you hoped. Thanks a million for being with us.
Thank you, David. I enjoyed it.
Thanks there to Fred Karger. Still to come, we'll be hearing about the darker side of comedy as well as the laughs, and finding out the truth behind the fact that there may be 17 missing pyramids of Egypt somewhere under the sand. Dramatic stuff in a trice.